All right, I'm not sure if Irene's there today, but fine, no problem. Okay. We'll start in another minute or two. Wait, so who are you actually?
She's coming. Can I come?
So this lesson and next lesson, we're going to be doing, famous Rabbanim, from that 16th century Poland. And then I have another sheet already prepared. Those sort of go from 16th into the 17th. So, but I'm sure as we do it, you will definitely recognize some of the names. Some are not as prominent, but many of them, because I remember as I was preparing and doing this, I mean, there's certain names that I know I've heard probably, Rabbi giving a shear or something. I don't know, who are these people? When did they, what did they contribute? So I also call my son in Detroit. More information. So because he studies some of these things. Then my husband has to meet him also. How much but he had to show me where the Ramah is. Okay. So when we're doing now, it's 10 o'clock, so I'll begin. We're doing again. We are continuing. We started off with two Rabbanim, or considered the Rabbanim in 16th century Poland, and one was this Rabbi Pollack. He was the one that who had all these arguments with people, a very strong personality. And then there's like Shalom Shachner, Rabbi Shalom Shachner, and he had a yeshiva, and he influenced many. And you'll see where as we go through, you will often come in and say, oh, that they had learned, under Rabbi Shachner. So again, I wasn't so familiar with his name, quite honestly. I mean, I think some of his disciples, became more famous, but it is thanks to him and the fact that he established Shiva, in Lublin, where all the then studied. So today we're going to do the Ramah, who is extremely well known and famous because he is the one who wrote the version, so to speak, of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch was written by Rabbi Yosef Karo. While he probably started writing it, actually he wrote a book called Beit Yosef, which is very lengthy. And it took him actually over 20 years to write it. He started writing it, I don't remember, but he was a little boy, 4 years old when they were expelled from Spain, and the family went to the Ottoman Empire, lived in a few different places, but he started his writing in a city in Turkey called Adrianople. But then he made Aliyah, and he came to live in Eretz Yisrael in the city of Bat, which is very famous, for the Kabbalah and the Ari, all. But there's also was this tremendous work of halacha that with Rabbi Yosef Karo, had put together. Again, it is not that teacher Shulchan Aruch, which I know I studied, from. It's a multi-volume work, and he wrote it. First, I told you he wrote this Beit Yosef, which apparently is really lengthy. The Shulchan Aruch must have been a shorter version. My husband has a whole set of it, but really, he was showing me something. It's like the Shulchan Aruch part's like this, and there are all these commentaries around it. So, maybe if you just publish the Shulchan Aruch in and of itself, it would be, much smaller. And the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch that we used was the 19th or 20th. I don't remember when that came out. Yeah, probably. Yeah, so it's more the 20th. Yes. But again, because he is a descendant of Spanish Jews, Farad, so the original work of the Shulchan Aruch, included primarily, I mean, he was definitely influenced by some of the great Ashkenazim who had come before him, and he had looked at the Torah and based his work on the work of the Torah. I'll explain that in a minute. But it's primarily with a slant towards the halachic influence by Rabbanim. And the three key people that that he included would have been the Rambam, Riff, the Rambam, and the Rush. The Rush is, I don't know if you remember when we had learned about him. He was a German Jew, but then remember things got so bad in Germany. Not the era right now that we're talking about, but going back to several generations, and he left Germany. He came to live in Spain, where he continued, learning here. So he sort of, maybe you could say, is a bridge between that Ashkenazi world and the Sephardic world. Anyway, so when Rabbi Yosef wrote his monumental work, he was basing it on, I told you, it's like layer upon layer upon layer, and that is how, the halacha, that's how the oral law, right, develops over centuries. So again, but because the Rush came to live in Spain, so he's also considered like a giant, from that Arctic world. And he based his work on the Torah because the Torah divided all halacha into 4 main categories. So when he wrote his work, he also, same pattern, 4 major, dividing halacha into categories, just like the Torah had done, Torah, like lines. So that's where we are right now. I'm going to sit down so I make sure that Irene can see. Okay, Irene, hello. So, and this almost probably from the get-go, again, because of his brilliance and how he wrote it. The Shulchan Aruch, became widespread, and everybody was starting to accept it. But in the Ashkenazi world, they felt that that certain customs that had evolved over the years in the Ashkenazi world were not being addressed in the Shulchan Aruch. So as a result, we'll be studying him in a minute. The Ramah wrote, it's part of what I told you. I looked at the page so I could see what it is. So, and like, at least the version that my husband knows, it's like the darker part of the printing is the Shulchan Aruch that Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote. When there's a point that he wants to interject, an Ashkenazi version, it's right underneath it, but in it's not as, well, again, this is the printer's decision, it's a slightly lighter, print, typeface. And it's also written in Rashi script. So the Shulchan Aruch is Hebrew, right? The Ramah's, addition to it. I mean, it's Hebrew, but it's written in Rashi script. So you can really see the difference, But I told you on this page, right? So as I say, maybe it's like yay long, and around it are these huge, commentaries, of people who came, years afterwards, but are considered highly important. So if a scholar, you're really studying halacha, we would need to look at what everybody else, their comments, on how to follow a particular law. All right, so let's discuss now Rabbi Moshe. So listen, his background and how he rose to this great promise. So you see his years, he's from 1530 to 1572. And then somebody commented, really, he died at 42 years old. Really, double. I bet the information didn't really indicate what was wrong with him, why he passed away in such a unfortunate things happen. Okay. The Ramah was the leading disciple of Rabbi Shalom Shachna. And remember, I told you Rabbi Shalom Shachna, he's most famous for, I would say, for establishing his yeshiva and then having all these very famous yeshiva students who learned there. He was born into one of the most prestigious families in Krakow. His father, Rabbi Israel, was himself a Talmud Chacham of note, an extremely successful businessman, noted for his philanthropy. Rabbi Israel was also mediator, called the Parnas, of the Krakow Jewish community, which was one of the most respected in 16th century Europe. So there were like Posen, Lublin, right, and Krakow. I would say these are the main centers, although Jews are certainly living, in many parts of Poland already. And like this is interesting. The name Israel was an allusion to Ramah's middle name, Israel, which was a common nickname for Yisrael. So that's interesting. The Ramah's brother, he had a brother, Rav was a son-in-law of Rav Shlomo Luria. And then getting totally confused. We're going to learn about him separately. Okay. And his sister Miriam was married to Rabbi Pinchas. I don't know if that's his name. Pinchas Harwood, a noted scholar and Rosh Yeshiva. Okay, and I will address all of the, other links. The Ramah studied under Rav Shalom Lublin, remember who Yeshiva was? The foremost Rosh Yeshiva in Poland. His master was so fond of him that he took him as his son-in-law. Right? Daughter, I have a perfect match for you. Shortly after his marriage, Rabbi Moshe was appointed as rabbi in Krakow. He was a very young man. An extremely prestigious post for such a young man. Unfortunately, misfortune stalked Rabbi Moshe in somewhere in his years 1551, 52. First, his mother died. Then his 20-year-old wife died. And then his maternal grandmother passed away. Here, take sheets. And a pleasure to see you back. And we're doing this. That's going to be talking about the Ramah. We're going to start with that one, and then eventually we'll do the second one. Okay. And again, Nebuch, I don't know what she died of, but listen, people had illnesses and she could have died of childbirth. Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know. And then his maternal grandmother passed away. To perpetuate their memory, the Ramah's father built a synagogue, which came to be known as the Ramah's Shul. I know, does that still exist? Yes, you could go there and see it. Okay. Rabbi Moshe then married the daughter of Rabbi Mordechai Katz, a respected member of the Krakow community. And we'll come back to that relationship later on. The Ramah established a yeshiva in Krakow. So now we're going to have a yeshiva in Lublin of note, and now one in Krakow. Where he delivered many brilliant discourses and also supplied his students with material needs, thanks to the wealthy father-in-law. Okay, because I told you there was money there. Okay. Wait, is he or he himself came from money? What was it? Yeah, right. So in any case, that's where he was able to help support the various yeshivas. The yeshiva soon competed with the great yeshivot of Lublin. All right. I mean, you're each trying to get the best students. So that's why there's competition. Among his better known disciples were the Levush. We will do him later, and you'll learn why is he called a Levush. Levush means dress, but we'll come to that later. We're first one on the one that says Rabbi Moshe Israel. And I'm at that last paragraph right now. Okay. Levush, Rabbi Yehoshua, Paul Cohen. Just take this. I just wanted to let you know, you might see some of these names. He wrote this Ma, Rabbi David Gantz, he was a famous historian and astronomer. Rav Hirsch Shor, one of the teachers of the Bach separately. And Rabbi Abraham Horowitz, remember we had a Horowitz before, it's a well-known family, who was the father of the Shlot, and we will do the Shlot later on also. You can get totally confused. I mean, I'm trying to bring in obviously the most prominent Rabbanim, from this. And on occasion, I'll have the name of another Rav who maybe is not as prominent, but makes a link, So I feel that it's important, to learn something about that individual. The Ramah was recognized as a halachic authority, but still a young man. He carried on extensive halachic correspondence with his older contemporaries, such as the Maram Adwa, of the argument. I'll give you that sheet. Rabbi Yosef Paro and Rabbi Shlomo Luria Marshall, and we'll discuss the Marshall, but later after the Ramah. I wanted to do the Ramah because he was slightly older, and also he's such an important. Spend a lot of time with him. His writings do not indicate that he was an enthusiast of the intricate Pilpul method of study. You know, that Rav Pollock, he introduced that Pilpul thing, and it did become widespread usage in many yeshivot. They like that. It showed really the brilliance of the person who could cover a really convoluted Pilpul. But in other areas, other Rabbanim and other yeshivas were very much opposed to that. He stressed and said the halachic aspect of Talmudic study, preferring the more apparent meanings of the text. And not putting on a show, introducing, all sorts of references to many different things. He showed great respect, rather, for Rabbi Yaakov Pollock, right? Again, he's the one who propagated the Pilpul method of study, and for Rabbi Shalom Shachman. Again, and these are the two beginning, great rabbinic. Quoting their halachic opinions in his own works, even though he quietly disagreed with your scholarly style and method. In addition to comment on halacha, the Ramah immersed himself in the study of medieval Jewish philosophy and Kabbalah. You're going to see it's so interesting because later, there's going to be this huge, we're talking about more 18th century between the Hasidim, who was up with immerse themselves in Kabbalah, and then what became known as the Misnagdim, who opposed that method of learning. But in this era, so you'll see so many of these Rabbanim did study Kabbalah, and I saw no conflict, with doing that, and they could intermingle the ideas of the Kabbalah into their study of halacha. He believed that the two systems were compatible, and that the difference between them were a mere differences, right? Between them were a mere matter of semantics. I think it's more than that, but okay, but that was his approach. Okay. The keen interest in philosophy shown by students in Polish yeshivot in the period before the 1648 pogroms can be attributed to the Ramah's interest in this subject. So they were studying Kabbalah, studying philosophy. I mean, they're really sort of almost diametrically opposed in the pros and mysticism, But as I say, I guess he was just curious and interested in many aspects of Judaism, and he thought that was perfectly fine to study all these things. Ramah's elder contemporary, Rabbi Shlomo Luria, we will do him separately, strongly helped him to test for his interest in secular studies, especially philosophy. That dates back all the way to the time of the Rambam. Remember, the Rambam certainly, Aristotle, and in many of his works are considered to be greatest philosophic works. And then, boy, I remember the Rabbanim from Provence and some within Spain and other areas. Boy, did they oppose. They thought that was terrible, and that was going to lead people astray, and they would no longer practice their Judaism. So it dates back hundreds of years. The Ramah also evinced a keen interest in astronomy and history. And they always seem to study astronomy. Again, a lot of that because of the calendar. I mean, I don't think we look at the stars to figure out the calendar. You don't have to do it. I mean, from the 400s in Israel, that calendar, was made for generations. But I guess, going over many, many centuries beyond that, there was always an interest in astronomy and, the lunar calendar and the solar calendar, and have to reconcile everything, especially to determine when the Jewish holidays would fall. The Ramah's faith rests upon his work, which we talked about, especially his annotations to Rabbi Yosef Karo's Shulchan Aruch. Since Rabbi Yosef Karo adopted the practices of the Sephardic communities, I told you, and he stressed in particular the Rambam, the Rif, right, and the Rosh, right? His code was not usable for Ashkenazi until the Rabbah. Ma added a supplement, Sefer Hama. I love that. The Shulchan Aruch, from Pesach. Well, you have the Shulchan Aruch, you're having your meal, but the Mapat is the tablecloth So I think that's beautiful, that he used that a word, a complementary word to what the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, where am I up to? Okay, so it's called the Sefer HaMatzah. I mean, my husband, he showed me that it's the Shulchan Aruch. I mean, he doesn't say Sefer HaMatzah on it. He just has, but I guess it's referred to if you're just studying the Ramaz Ashkenazic notes. It's called Sefer HaMatzah. Consists of notes inserted into the text. Okay, and it came out in Krakow in 1571. We talked about this before. How the invention of the printing press helped to proliferate, all these great works that we're going to be studying, and that's why every Jewish community has several copies of it. This work established Ramaz the preeminent halacha for all of Ashkenazic Jewry. Thus, the Shulchan Aruch, as modified, right, by these notes, became the supreme code of law for worldwide Jewry. The Ramaz notes elevated Rabbi Yosef Karo's Shulchan Aruch from an individual expression of halachic view, all right, to the level of an authoritative halachic codex, worthy of use by all the Jewry. So if you're studying halacha and you want to get to the base, you would study Shulchan Aruch. And obviously, particularly if you're Ashkenazi, you would do it together with a Ramaz notes. I don't know if you're Sephardic, perhaps you ignore that part, and you just do the Shulchan Aruch. I'm not sure, when they study it, how. It was a Ramaz humility which induced him to express his opinion in the form of glosses to a contemporary work, rather than opt for a personal accomplishment in the form of an original individual work. Listen, he could have published his thing as a totally separate work. You could always say it would be in contrast or contradistinction to the Sephardic Shulchan Aruch, but I think he recognized the brilliance, right, of Rabbi Yosef Karo in writing the Shulchan Aruch. So he's just adding on his Ashkenazic notes to it. They're called glosses, fancy word, And again, really, that's also in praise of him, the kind of person he was, very special individual. The Ramaz rulings are heavily based on the opinions of the Tosfot. That would make sense because obviously Rabbi Yosef Karo was not studying Tosfot. Remember, the Tosfos are those great Rabbanim coming after Rashi, who have a commentary on the Talmud, on the Gemara, and they're French and German Rabbanim. Some preceding him, but only a generation. Okay, and so so the Tosfos, which obviously goes back, we're talking about the 1100s, and other later German and French. Okay. And this he differed from Rabbi Yosef Karo, who based his choice of authorities almost exclusively on the views of the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rush, with heavy emphasis on Rambam. So if there's ever, he's not sure which, opinion to follow. First of all, he would always go by the majority, that he's having three scholars. He's looking at their writings. And then if two said this or one said that, he would follow it with the two. But always, the prime authority was I mean, I probably would have done the same because, the Mishnah Torah is also such an authoritative work. Shulchan Aruch is building upon what's already written in the Mishnah Torah, and the Rushes and things are on the side of them. He also had tremendous preference for time hallowed customs. So maybe if you can't trace something back halachically, but it's been people are following this, method of following Jewish law for over, let's say, 2 centuries. So it's sort of become it's become an established law. So he would have included those. He warns us to be careful not to disparage Jewish customs as they were not instituted for naught. I don't have any particular example in mind, but just certain things that one would do. I'm not talking about nourishment, but something that is so to speak halachically based. He would have, those customs he would have accepted. He also made extensive use of the rules Then in cases involving substantial monetary laws, that's called hefsed law, more lenient views may be followed. And my father, Allah Shalom, he always said, it's actually a more brilliant scholar who could be Makil, the one who wants to be Mahmir, because he could always take the most extreme view. But if you really know the halacha, you can be Makil. Please come up here. Okay. So we're doing right now the one that's on the Ramah. So with that, and then okay. And we are on page 3 of the okay, absolutely. All right. We have some more Tova, you're back. Oh my gosh. So nice to see you. Wow. And another gentleman too. Nice to see you also. All right. By the way, those of you, Andrea told me, Andrea from the offshore office here, said that when she posts or reminders of my classes, that she includes there all my notes, that I have, written out, which I distribute here. But you can download them separately yourselves at home if you want to look on. All right. Let's see. Come on with the Ramah. Okay. So on the second paragraph, Ramah also authored Darchei Moshe, short comments on the Torah and the Beis Yosef. Okay. So the Torah, I told you, that's the thing the Beis Yosef and the Shulchan Aruch are based on, the Torah. And I told you it divides halacha, into 4 major categories. And that's the Shulchan Aruch is also 4 major categories. All right. They form the basis for his glosses on the Shulchan Aruch. Look how many works you would have to study as time goes on. How about it? Nowadays, you have some sort of halachic issue comes up, and if it's a great rub, can you imagine how many sources they have to look into? I mean, it's amazing. This gets more and more complicated as time goes by. He originally envisioned this as an encyclopedic work, elaborating on all the conflicting views regarding any matter touched upon in Torah. He would then conclude with a final halacha. I mean, sometimes when you're reading, even when I do Daf Yomi Gemara, I find saying, no, so what's the halacha? So what do we actually follow? Well, I would say the Shulchan Aruch is at this point. Then, but probably if it's a complicated thing, you would have to look at what people wrote in later generations. How did they interpret? I know, right? Right. To me, I think the Shulchan Aruch is considered the most authoritative source. Or there might be certain people who wrote commentaries on it, and you would look at them. The base, right? Well, I'm Gain Avraham. There are other later rabbot. Yes, the Sheilot to Shuvot, right? That's where. Interesting. So again, as I say, I would say nowadays you have to be a pretty well-versed person, to be able to, I mean, how many great, I mean, we're fragmented, right? It's not like there's one great road that we're looking to. So again, just to answer you, the Shulchan Aruch is considered the base work, right? The one would always start with. Okay. Okay, once the Shulchan Aruch had been published, Ramah shortened his work and completed it in the form of a complement to Beis Yosef. Remember, Beis Yosef precedes the Shulchan Aruch. It's a much lengthier work. And the ironic thing is, when Rabbi Yosef Karo wrote his Shulchan Aruch, he considered that this was going to be a shortened and easier version that one could study, to see what the halach is. But afterwards, there's so many commentaries, comments, that have come afterwards. This book was never published, but printed in the shortened form together with the tour. Interesting, because he's sort of following that Ashkenazi version. And that's what came out in Berlin, 1702-03. It is today a standard feature of that work. So I guess if you own a tour, right? I don't know, is it multi-volume, the tour? Okay. Then you would you would see the Ramah's comments there. It would have been there as well. In other words, the main body is always like in the center, and then surrounding it are numerous comments. I mean, just look at the page of the Gemara, right? It's like same thing, same format. Another of the Ramah's major works is Torah Chatas, came out in Krakow, 1569. It's a codex on dietary laws. I know, it seems odd, right? I have no idea why it's called that. Because that makes sounds like sin. Yeah, right. I'll have to look it up unless I wrote something incorrectly. I don't know. I'll check it out. It was modeled on Rabbi Yitzchok of Durin's Sharei Dura. Rabbi Sharei, whatever. We probably had touched it. Rabbi Chaim ben Betzalel severely criticized this work. Another person. In his Vikuach Mayim Chaim, came out in Amsterdam in 1612. There's a big printing press in Amsterdam, so that's why you'll see some works are published there. He felt that halacha had to be rooted in solid Talmudic scholarship, and that its codification would lead to the temptation to dispense with the arduous task of studying the text. And again, you must always start your learning with the basic text, and then you can proceed. You shouldn't just look at, let's say, another later commentator who might be brilliant in his own right, but to even understand what he's adding to the conversation, you must look at the original work. So in other words, that's why they study Gemara so much, right, in yeshivas. That is the base. That is the base, But then afterwards, to find out halacha, then we say the Shulchan Aruch is that base, or the Mishnah Torah. Oh gosh, Rav Chaim flatly rejected the entire trend to present halacha in codex form. He didn't like that idea. Okay. That was that Rabbi Chaim ben Betzalel that we were talking about. I said they all have disputes with one another. He felt halacha had to be rooted in a solid Talmudic scholarship and its codification, right? That you might, you wouldn't bother studying anything else. Well, let's just go to this. Like if you just went to the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, you didn't go any either prior or even after comments. One would then rely only on the authority of the codifier. So, like if you're relying on the Mishnah Torah, you're relying on the Rambam. Okay, this is how he interprets halacha. You're looking just maybe at the Shulchan Aruch. Well, so that's Rabbi Yosef's Karo, so to speak, interpretation of halacha and codifying it, which even at that early date already differed substantially from the usage. Oh, sorry, I skipped a bit. Right. Ramah was also criticized for considering only Polish customs, which even at that early date already differed substantially from the usage in Germany. On the other hand, Poland is now the major center of Torah learning. Germany it will have some prominence in a later century, but at this point, I told you, just because of the political landscape in Germany, it's so fragmented. Yes, there are some great Rabbanim there, but he's living in Poland, and that's where most of the Jews are at this point. So of course he's going to write more about the Polish custom. I don't think that's fair to criticize, but this was one main opinion, Rabbi Chaim ben Betzalel. Beside his halachic work, the Ramah wrote an allegorical exposition on the book of Esther. And this is interesting. Yes, actually, as I've been studying all the Rabbanim, we've been doing it for over centuries of Rabbanim. A lot of them seem to, they must like something about the book of Esther, because very often they have commentaries. He wrote this work in the year 1556 when he fled Krakow because of a plague. And he found himself alone and without farm on Purim Day. Yes, he's feeling very sad. He conceived the novel idea to write this commentary on Esther, which he then presented to his father in lieu of Shalach Manos. Isn't that nice? That's a lovely gift, you know? Yeah, yes, right. He also wrote a philosophical explanation of the temple, you know, and its sacrifices, and that came out from 1570. He wrote a lot, quite a bit. I mean, he's most famous again for putting down the Ashkenazi interpretation of halacha as part of the Shulchan Aruch, but you see he wrote many other things. Altogether, his response contained over 132 halachic communications that came out and published in Krakow in 1640, so obviously posthumous. In addition, he wrote a commentary to the Zohar, but it has still today remained unpublished. So there must be a manuscript of it someplace. I don't know. So, I need the Hebrew University, library maybe. There, I honestly have no idea, where these manuscripts might be. A unique contribution of the Ramah was his expertise as a scribe, Sophia. He obtained a special authoritative tikkun, that's a manual for writing Torah scrolls, from Tzfat. Remember, that was the Tzfat actually was Bavaria, that is where, like our Torah that we open up, every Shabbos, that authoritative text really comes out mostly out of the Jews, not so much Tzfat, but out of Bavaria. Through the services, Rabbi Yosef Karo, it makes sense. Rabbi Yosef Karo is living in, so if he wants to have an authoritative Torah scroll, he would have turned to somebody else. I mean, at this point, it's very, I'm talking about going back, generations. That the Masoretic text is called, coming out of Tiberi. The Rambam had a copy of that. So he's, I don't know how many Jews are even living in Bavaria. It's much nicer spot. You're up in the mountains. It's lovely. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful there. Bavaria, do you ever go there in the summer? A plus. So hot and humid. Well, I don't know. We live here in Florida, hot and humid too. So, right. But they had no air conditioning. He then read a Torah scroll following its precise instructions. The scroll apparently contained 24 variations from most other scrolls then extant in Eastern Europe. So don't think that the Torah that we are reading from, it's gone through, I'm not saying the major part of it, certain words or letters that were different. Again, now we have an authoritative thing. You can go to any shul, be the same, text. But if you would go back generations, there would be these slight variations. Okay, the scroll, which existed up to World War II, was deposited in the Ramah and would be read from on selected occasions. The great reverence for Ramah was attested to by yearly pilgrimages to his grave on his yahrzeit. Jewry's appreciation for his accomplishments is summed up by the inscription on his tombstone, which reads, a la the Rambam's, right? This one says from Moshe, meaning the Rambam. The one on the Rambam's grave means from Moshe Rabbeinu to, the Rambam, but here it's going from the Rambam to the Moshe of the Ramah. There was no one like Moshe. I think that's actually very, very beautiful. So Rabbi Green, you said you were actually there. You saw all this? Oh. Oh, so they wasn't destroyed by the Germans. Yeah, yeah. Well, this is Krakow. Also, I don't believe that Krakow was bombed even by the Allied forces. So if you go there, you can see many of the original. I've never been there. I've never been to Eastern Europe. I don't know if I ever will, quite honestly. I know my son Shalom is interested at some point going to Lithuania, so he could, see, our background. But I don't know. Yeah, yeah. Why should we give the money to the Poles? Yeah. So, we've been having trouble with our car. Couldn't believe it. The engine conked out. So my husband took out the manual to see what the problem might be. Our engine was made in Poland. Well, that we know. It's a Ford. It's a Ford car. Engine made in Poland. Yeah. I said, oh, no wonder it fell apart. After 3 years on the engine should totally go. Anyway, so we had a whole thing just on the Ramah because again, he was, you know, an erudite person. He so has influenced us, especially though we're Ashkenazim and, we also, Shulchan Aruch is the prime source for halacha. And so obviously any Ashkenazi Rav would be studying Ramah's opinions on a particular halachic topic. We're going to go on now to do a few other people. Now, remember, we talked about this Rabbi Shlomo Luria. So I'm on the sheet now that says additional rabbinic figures, 16th century Poland. I'm going to make another, well, I actually already have, we'll do it next week, of those who bridge the gap between the 16th and the 17th century. Those I'm doing here really lived totally, within the 16th century. This is amazing. I mean, Jews, we had learned Jews were going to live in Poland already from the 14th to the 15th century. But isn't this incredible, in such a short time period, that all these brilliant scholars, but the thing is the brilliant scholars from Germany had left, and they were coming to study in these yeshivas in Poland. So now we'll go on to Rabbi Shlomo Luria, which when I look at his name, he almost sounds Italian to me, but he's not. Yeah, but apparently he's not. Okay, and he's known as the Maharshal. Okay, it's an acronym. You take the first letter. Right. And when did he live? Again, circa, that means about, we don't know 100%, 1510 to 1573. So he lived, the Ramaz actually was born afterwards, but died before him. So he lived into his 60s. Which I guess in those days. The Maharshal. It's a different Indian person. This is a Maharshal because of Luria. That's why you had that Lamed there. Okay, Maharshal was descended from a prominent rabbinic family, which traces genealogy to Rashi. That's why Zeta did that. So, in one of his forums, just like a family tree. Can't read half of this. He was related to many of the prominent rabbis of his era, including the Ramah and Rabbi Meir Kappenellenbogen. Remember him? That was the Maharashtra of Ottawa. Okay. I mean, they all would have communicated one with the other, I mean, it perhaps goes on to this day. I know we had from Isaiah, Shalos and Teshuvot that he was written back and forth with certain Rabbanim, right, from Lithuania, came to America. In his youth, he studied under his father and under his maternal grandfather. He became the son-in-law of the Rosh Yeshiva in Lvov and Ostro. I was going to look it up. I'm not sure 100% where Ostro is. I have to look it up. I'll let you know. When his father-in-law left to settle in Yerushalayim, Rabbi Shlomo succeeded him in his post, all right, in these towns of Lvov, Ostro. He also served as rabbi in Rosh Yeshiva in Brisk, family. And finally, in 1569, he officiated as Rosh Yeshiva in Lublin. And the famous yeshivas are the one in Lublin and the one in Krakow. This was at the same time that Rabbi Yisrael, who was the son of Rabbi Shalom Shachna, right? Remember, I told you he was one of the most preeminent rabbanim in Poland, served as rabbi. Just want to pause here. Every town would have had, a major town would have had, of course, a Rav, the Rav of the town, but then you would have a yeshiva, and there would be the Rosh Yeshiva. On occasion, it might have been the same person, but there were so many duties and obligations involved with each post that usually it was separated because the Rav would have dealt with communal affairs or individuals, whereas you had the Rosh Yeshiva who was running yeshiva, would have put up Piskei Halacha, questions came to him of halachic nature. And I was not to say that a Rav couldn't have done this too, but they did divide up their responsibility. Some of the greatest scholars of his generation consider themselves to be his disciples. The Maharal of Prague himself studied under the Maharshal. The names are confusing. That's all right. The Maharshal's approach to halacha was unique in his generation. He refused to accept the views of the old masters without first tracing each subject to its source in the Talmud and commentary. Yes, he was a very strict taskmaster. Don't just tell me you said you saw this, you read this. Go back to the original source, right? Again, I think obviously that's why in the yeshivas, you learn Gemara. Then you can introduce other, great writings that came afterwards. But you have to have a good grasp of, what is written itself in the Gemara. That's like the preeminent halachic authority, and then would say that the more, closer times would be then the Shul, would be the Mishnah Torah. Actually, I happen to love the Mishnah Torah. I mean, it's just most beautifully written Hebrew, and it's easy to understand. And then you would study Shulchan Aruch, and then all the 1,000,001 commentaries on it afterwards. Okay. Okay. Where am I up to? Okay, it's unique. He refused to accept a view, right? You had to study the source, right, in the Talmud, and then the basic commentaries, which would be Tosfos and Rashi. Just to remind you, the Talmud, which means Mishnah plus Gemara, that was compiled, or the fancy words redacted, around the year 450, just say 500. It's easier. Mishnah 200, Gemara 500. All right. And then the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. So now we're talking about the 1100s and the 1200s. So you can see, the 100 years. And now the Shulchan Aruch, we're talking about the 1500s. All right. So you see how, it takes a while maybe for something to become so authoritative and so widely accepted. Proceed from there and ascertain the correct view. In other words, look at the basic source, understand what that is saying. Then you can look at the other commentaries, and then you'll understand what's the proper way to follow a particular halacha. Independent, strong-minded, Mashal did not hesitate to disagree with Rabbi Yosef Karo. And even the Rambam, in cases where, in his opinion, they had not penetrated the essence of the subject in making their decision. And one of the biggest criticisms is, and we'll be learning this, both the Rambam, right, in his Mishnah Torah, and Rabbi Yosef Karo in his Shulchan Aruch, they do not put down the sources from where they made their decision what the halacha is. So that opens it up to a lot of controversy. Don't just tell me this is the halacha. Well, yeah, how did you come to that decision? All right, how are we doing time? We'll do a little bit more. All right. The Maharshal opposed the method of pilpul used in the Polish yeshivas of his day. Rather, he preferred the method of seeking to comprehend the plain meaning of the Talmudic discussion. Now, let me tell you, it's not so easy to understand the plain meaning, because, with each thing that they're bringing up, they're like at least 3 opinions, with their own, quotation, for some words, let's say in Tanakh, that the basing, their interpretation are. Right? The Gemara again does not tell you in the end what the halacha is. That's why you could see the need of later generations where they started printing works where they codified the law. Okay, but he, as I say, he felt he must go back again, and he's not just alone. Many great rabbis study the actual text of the Gemara and then proceed from there. He criticized Rabbi Yosef Karo for basing many of his decisions on inaccurate text. Remember, everything up until the printing press was handwritten. So there could have, even in the Gemara, well, now we have what it's based on the Vilna, I think, Gemara, when we published in Vilna. But there also, just like I told you, even at Torah school, could be slight variations in certain. That's why, did you ever pay attention? There's a thing called Kitab as it's written, but then this is called Crete. This is how you should read it, and it makes it a different meaning when you look at it. So it is printed in a certain way, but again, because there's this still, I guess they couldn't decide 100%. what the accurate text would be. Yeah. So his Chochmas Shlomo is one of his sforim, is testimony to the pains he took to establish the correct version in the Talmud and its principal commentary. I mean, it's really truly amazing that all these things had been handwritten, all these manuscripts, and they were preserved, right, down through the decades and then the centuries. It's really amazing. And that the principal commentaries, as I mentioned before, they would in other words, the main commentaries on the Gemara are Rashi and Tosfos. And Tosfos are the people come after Rashi, and those are French and German scholars, from existing manuscripts and from the context itself. Right, you have to really carefully read the text to understand what the discussion is. Shall we do one more? Okay. Mashal was also very critical of Rabbi Yosef Karo for the method of compromise he used in deciding the halacha, recognizing, as we discussed, just these three basic authorities. I'm sure he looked at others, but these were the three individuals and their writings that he relied upon, right? The Rif, that's Rabbi Yehuda Al-Fassi, because he originally came from Morocco, the Rambam, and the Rosh. And the Rosh came originally from Germany, but it also ended up settling in Spain. So these are all then, so to speak, Spanish Jewish scholars. In any controversy between these three scholars, Rabbi Karo decided in favor of the majority. I mentioned that. Mashal opposed the designation of only these three as authorities and the complete disregarding of any other halachic opinions, especially those of the Tosfos, right? Because obviously he believes you must go back to the original, right? And Tosfos are one of the key commentators on the Gemara. He also criticized Rabbi Karo in not basing his decisions on an independent evaluation of the merits of each opinion as a true interpretation of the Talmudic text. Whatever. Again, his whole premise is go back to the original, fine to look at these others. And of course, he's basing it just on, even though the Rosh, I told you, does come from Germany, and was a scholar in Germany, left to go to live in Spain. So actually, Rabbi Yosef Karo's mind, he was including, so to speak, Ashkenazi interpretation, especially because he's relying on the Rosh. But his main person he's relying on Rambam, who's definitely started. So we'll continue with this next time. I think I find it endlessly fascinating. It's a little confusing sometimes with the names, but it's so interesting to see how halacha developed and grew, and how different people emphasize different scholars or methodologies over time. So if you're really a very good student, you have to study how it works. Not so easy. Yes, the names are so familiar. Yeah. Well, now you know. So Luria, just think the Lamed, it's Luria. That's his last name. Maybe he did come. The family came originally from Italy, because it definitely sounds like an Italian name to me. All right. Goodbye, ladies. Great to see you all. Be well.
Thank you.
How's your eye, Malka? How's your eye?
It's still red there. I have to go for another checkup, tomorrow. I mean, it's definitely better. Definitely
All right.
better.
Good.
But not 100% perfect yet, but we're going in the right direction.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, my friend, be well. Enjoy the rest of the week. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you. You too.
See you next week. Okay. And Tova, you can download those sheets separately if you want. All right. So whatever works out for you. Okay. I see we lost that guy who was on. My pleasure. Be well, everybody. Yes. Take care. Bye-bye. My pleasure. Thank you. How come I can't get this? I have to end it. Hold on. It's going to be raining this Shabbos.
No.
Well, it's definitely supposed to rain this Shabbos. Yeah, this Shabbos and Sunday. Yep. We've had a lovely week. Oh, I got together with the Mofskis. Barbara, I got together with the Mofskis last night. I saw the Mofskis last night. Yeah, they're looking good. Yeah. Wait, aren't they? I thought they're going. Where are they going for shop? This shop is they're in Boynton Beach, or they're coming to Joni's. Are they supposed to go to Joni's? Okay, so but you're not going. I can't seem to do this. I can't do it. Yeah, it'd be nice company. Yeah, just stay in the house. You don't have to go out. I'm gonna have to. Uh-oh. So. They say when you know. If you know what that is. Oh, they are? Oh, so when you get a car, right, as long as you don't have to deal with it. And then clean all the laundry out. Getting difficult. All right.